Welcome back to the Go Draft. My name's Andy Guerdat. I've been a working writer in Hollywood for 45 years, and I am sharing with you my ideas and, more importantly, my techniques on screen and television writing. We're going to talk about how you begin your story and how you end your story, but first I want to talk a little bit about the difference between story and plot, because there is a major difference and it's important you know it. The story is the emotional journey of the protagonist. The plot is the mechanism through which that story is dramatized. It's a good way to think of it maybe as the plot is like a pipe. It's like a conduit, right? It's a conduit through which the emotion of the story flows. And you can change that pipe, you can move it, you can change its diameter, you can change its direction and go left, right, up, down, you can split it in two. You can do all kinds of things with the plot to make it serve the story so that it carries the emotion of the story in the best possible way. Always change your plot to serve the story. That's the lesson to take away here. The audience only cares about the story. Remember, our job is to make the audience feel something, and they have paid their money either through a box office or through paying their cable bill or their streaming app bill. They have paid their money in order to feel something. They want to feel something. That means they only care about the story, not the plot. So you may have fallen in love with some plot thing that seemed really cool when you thought it up, and you just don't want to get rid of it. But if it does not serve the story, get rid of it or change it. Always change plot to serve story. I'll give you an example. Let's say I want to shoot a short film, right? I have scraped together a few $1,000s. I want to shoot a film. And here's a story I want to tell. It's a cityscape at night. We see a guy looking kind of haggard, worse for wear, walks across the street, goes into a high-rise office building, goes in the lobby, pushes the elevator button, gets in the elevator, pushes the R button for rooftop. He gets out on the roof. It's night. He walks to the edge of the roof. He takes an envelope out of his pocket, opens it up. It clearly has a suicide note in it. He sets the envelope down by the edge of the roof, puts a rock on it so it won't blow away. Then he steps up onto the wall that surrounds the rooftop, and he goes right out to the edge, and he takes a deep breath. He's about to jump, and he looks out across the cityscape, one last look. And as he does, he sees in a building maybe half a block away, a window's lit up, and in the window is a little boy, and the little boy is staring at him. And they lock eyes for a moment, and the little boy goes like this, and the guy looks out at him, and then he goes like this, and then he steps down off the wall and walks down off the rooftop. That's the story. Okay, so I go to shoot this and start budgeting it out, and I say, oh my God, I got to get permits to shoot in downtown street in Los Angeles. It's going to cost me money that I hadn't really figured on. I got to get a lighting package for this. That's going to be more expensive than I expected. I got to get special safety equipment. If I'm going to have an actor out near the edge of a building, I may have to hire a stuntman for a couple of shots. The insurance that I had planned to, insure the production with is going to go through the roof. I can't do this. I can't shoot my story. Okay, maybe not, but your parents or your buddy says, you can use my house to shoot in. I got a house in the suburbs. My wife and I will go away for the weekend. You can shoot there in the house if it does you any good. So how about this? Bedroom door opens. A guy walks out. He's haggard, kind of worse for wear. 3-day growth of beard. He clearly hasn't changed his clothes in a couple of 3 days. He's got an envelope in one hand and something we don't see in his other hand. He walks to the dining room table, which is covered with old food and bills and stuff. And he sits down. He opens the envelope. We look at it. We see it's a suicide note. He closes the envelope, sets it on the table. Then we see what he has in his other hand. It's a bottle of pills. And he opens the bottle and he pours the pills out all over the table, dozens of them. And then he scoops them into his hand, and he finds like a half-drunk beer there, and he's about to take the pills, and he looks up at the window one last time, and across the street there's a little boy playing in the yard across the street, playing in the leaves or chasing a butterfly or something. The little boy sees him, locks eyes with him and goes like this. The man goes like this. And he stands up, he goes in the bathroom, he dumps the pills down the toilet and flushes it. I just told the same story, but I changed the plot. If I had to, I could change the plot even more and still tell fundamentally the same story. Now let's look at an example of a movie that actually was made. Let's take Whiplash for example. The spine of Whiplash, I could say, the story is a young drummer tries to withstand the sadism of his music teacher in order to become as good as he's capable of being. Now, Damien Chazelle chose to use the world of music, and specifically jazz drumming, because that was something he had done when he was a young man and experimented with, tried it. He knew that world. He was comfortable in it. But he could have told the same story, or somebody else could have told the same story if they shifted it from a music school to law school. And in fact, somebody did that. It was called The Paper Chase years ago. Wasn't exactly the same story. It's pretty darn close. And you could have done it in the military, right? Officer and a Gentleman was kind of that story, pretty close. Other stories have been set in military environments where, a young guy wants to become a Navy SEAL or something, and the drill instructor puts him through hell in order to make him prove that he's worthy. The story would have been the same, even if the plot had been changed. And remember, story is everything. How important is story? Years ago, I was doing a project with the Zucker brothers, Zucker, Abram, Zucker. And it was a misbegotten project, never came to fruition, but I got to know them a little bit. And they had just done Airplane, which was a huge hit, and then they'd followed it up with a movie called Top Secret, which was a big flop. And their theory, why one worked and one didn't, or at least Jerry's theory, I'm not sure the others entirely agreed, but Jerry's theory anyway, was that Airplane was based on a movie, an existing movie called 0 Hour, a not very good disaster movie from the 1950s. And they bought the rights to it, and then they just followed the plot. They just followed that story right through it and pitched jokes on it, but the story was fundamentally the same. And because of that, Jerry's opinion was they could do the silliest, craziest, goofiest jokes possible, but all they had to do to get the audience back on story, remembering what the story is to cut away to this shot. So every time they cut away to that shot, and they must have cut away to that shot or one similar to it 6, 8, 10 times throughout the course of the movie, every time they cut away to it, the audience was reminded what the story was. Oh yeah, everybody's on an airplane, it's going to crash, it's flying through a storm, I'm back on story, back to the jokes. The story must always be moving forward. It must always be advancing, even if it's as simple as an airplane getting a little closer to crashing. It's still, in the simplest sense, a story, and it's still advancing. Here's an example of a great movie that that story always advanced, even when the plot didn't. It's called Charade. So 1963, it was written by Peter Stone and directed by Stanley Donen. And if you're interested in writing in the comedy thriller genre, you're always chasing Charade or North by Northwest. Those are the gold standard for that genre. And the story is this. A married woman, played by Audrey Hepburn, her husband is killed by three thieves, three bad guys. And she discovers that her husband used to be in their gang and that they killed him in order to get money that he stole from them many years ago. And now they killed him. He didn't have the money on him, so they figure she must have the money, so they're coming after her. And Cary Grant plays a charming, suave guy who comes to her aid, and we think he's a good guy until the end of Act 1, and then we discover, he's in league with the bad guys. And so the entire Act 2 of Charade is a series of Audrey Hepburn, who is the protagonist, discovering, as do we, that he's lying, and Then he makes up another lie to cover up that lie, convinces her and us that he's telling the truth. He really is a good guy, only to discover that's a lie too, and he really is a bad guy, and back and forth and back and forth. It's a series of lies. Now, the story is about their relationship. Is she going to fall in love with a guy who may very well be a liar and a thief and a killer, or not? That's the story, and we're engaged in that story. But the plot, in other words, the missing money, never moves an inch in Act 2. They never get any closer to finding the money. And only at the end of Act 2 did they finally come up with the answer to the mystery of where the money is, and it's one of the great plot twists of recent of cinema, I guess. But the story always advanced even when the plot didn't. Another example, we talked about Lost in Translation, how it essentially has no story. Two people meet by random. They happen to be in Tokyo, and they flirt with each other, and then 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 they leave. And that's what passes for a story in Lost in Translation. Now, take a similar starting point. Was a movie called Brief Encounter from the 1940s. It was written by Noel Coward, one of the great dramatists of the 20th century, and directed by David Lean, who may have been the best pure director who ever looked through a viewfinder. And the premise started kind of similarly. It was about two people, a man and a woman, who meet by pure chance. In this case, it was on a train platform in suburban London, going in different directions. They happen to meet, strike up a conversation. They like each other. They meet again by chance, and then they get to know each other a little better, and they still like each other. And we watch bit by bit as they fall in love. Little by little it happens. Then finally they try to resist falling in love. They try everything they can to try to deny that it's happening. Finally, they admit that they're falling in love, that they've fallen in love. Now they try to take action based on that, and they try to have an affair, and it goes embarrassingly wrong. And then ultimately, he decides, I can't keep doing this, and he takes a job in another country, and they part, and they'll never see each other again, knowing that they've left the love of their life. Every scene in that movie, very simple as it is, advances the story, advances their relationship, moves it closer and closer and closer to its ultimate resolution. Very different in terms of Lost in Translation, which is similar subject matter but handled very differently, and in my opinion, much, much worse. On the other hand, it's a successful movie, so, Sofia Coppola's laughing all the way to the bank. Then again, her last name is Coppola, so she was laughing all the way to the bank before she ever shot the movie. How do I begin my story? When you start your movie story, the first thing you want to get established as quickly as possible is what is the world of this story. And by world, I don't necessarily mean the geography, although it might include geography. More importantly, what is the emotional world of this story? What is it that's important, most important, for the audience to understand emotionally about the time and place of this story? For example, here's a famous opening. What does that opening tell us about the world we're about to enter? It tells us, of course, we're in outer space, that it's an interplanetary world. But more importantly, emotionally, it tells us in this world, there's a big power that's trying to destroy a smaller power, right? And even in fact, it was interesting how Lucas chose to have that gigantic spaceship come in out of the top of the frame so that it gave it even more power than it would have under other circumstances. That's what's most important to understand before we can move forward with Star Wars. Take a look now at, there's a completely different kind of opening. This is from Michael Clayton, written by Tony Gilroy.
Michael. Dear Michael. Of course it's you. Who else could they send? Who else could be trusted? And I know it's a long way and you're ready to go to work. All I'm saying is wait. Just wait. Just please hear me out, because this is not an episode. Relapse. Fuck up. I'm begging you, Michael. I'm begging you. Try and make believe this is not just madness, because this is not just madness. 2 weeks ago, I came out of the building, okay? I'm running across 6th Avenue. There's a car waiting. I got exactly 38 minutes to get to the airport, and I'm dictating. There's this panicked associate sprinting along beside me, scribbling in a notepad, and suddenly she starts screaming, and I realize we're standing in the middle of the street, the lights change, and there's this wall of traffic, serious traffic speeding towards us, and I freeze. I can't move. And I'm suddenly consumed with the overwhelming sensation that I'm covered with some sort of film. And it's in my hair, my face, and it's like a glaze, like a coating. And at first I thought, my God, I know what this is. This is some sort of amniotic embryonic fluid. I'm drenched in afterbirth. I've breached the chrysalis. I've been reborn. But then the traffic, the stampede, the cars, the trucks, the horns, boom, and screaming, and I'm thinking, no, reset. This is not rebirth. This is some kind of giddy illusion of renewal that happens in the final moment before death. And then I realized, no, this is completely wrong, because I look back at the building and I had the most stunning moment of clarity. I realized, Michael, that I had emerged, not through the doors of Kenner, Bach, and Lodin, not through the portals of our vast and powerful law firm, but from the asshole of an organism whose sole function is to excrete the poison, the ammo, the defoliant necessary for other, larger, more powerful organisms to destroy the miracle of humanity. And that I had been coded in this patina of shit for the best part of my life. The stench of it and the stain of it would in all likelihood take the rest of my life to undo. And you know what I did? I took a deep cleansing breath and I set that notion aside. I tabled it. I said to myself, as clear as this may be, as potent a feeling as this is, as true a thing as I believe that I have witnessed today, it must wait. It must stand the test of time. And Michael, the time is now.
Now, what is the world of Michael Clayton that Tony Gilroy wanted to establish? He wanted to establish that this is a cold, ruthless corporate jungle, and that it's about money and power, and that it's dangerous. That's the takeaway. And if you watch that opening, it would be pretty hard to turn away from that movie after having watched that opening sequence. Here's another one, a much subtler opening, but still compelling in its way. Okay, what's the world of Brokeback Mountain? What is it that's important for the audience to know so that they can emotionally feel the maximum impact from the story they're about to see? You need to know that it's a lonely place. The music, even the single guitar, sounds lonely. The image of a lone truck driving down a highway, a lonely guy steps all alone out of that truck. You also need to know that it's a cold place, it's a masculine place, and it's a silent place. It's a place where people don't talk, and they certainly don't talk about their feelings. They only talk when they absolutely have to. Isn't it interesting that the screenwriters, Larry McMurtry and Diana Osana, I think is her name, chose not to have any dialogue. Even when he steps out of that truck, he doesn't say, hey, goodbye, Clem. Thanks for the ride. This was really great. Hey, look me up next time you're in so-and-so. If they had done that, it wouldn't be wrong in the sense of, yeah, characters might do that, but it would have been very wrong for the world they were trying to establish, which is cold, silent, and masculine. Why? Now because you're going to tell a story about two guys who fall in love and are destroyed by that world. And for it to have the maximum impact, we need to know that right up front. Here's another famous opening. So what is Jaws about? It's about fear, specifically the primal fear of being eaten, something that we all have, even though it hasn't been that present in most of our lives, certainly not for the last few centuries, but nonetheless, it's buried into our DNA, and when Jaws tapped into it, that's one of the reasons why the emotions it unleashed were so powerful. They want to contrast that fear and that opening shot, that point of view shot of a shark swimming through the water at night. And of course, the famous music heightened it as well. And then cutting to the modern world, where you see, a campfire and some semi-normal looking kids, at least in the 1970s, and one of them's about to get eaten. And then there's this clip. Okay, what does that opening of Airplane tell us about the world we're about to inhabit? It tells us very clearly it's going to be a funny place and that it's going to be a movie parody. They used the same music from Jaws, or almost similar. I guess they changed a couple notes. It's going to be a world where you don't take anything too seriously, to set us up for the movie we're about to see. And nobody'd seen a movie like Airplane in quite a while. Blazing Saddles was somewhat similar, but Airplane was in 1980 was a bit of a jolt, so they had to prepare us for the world we're about to inhabit. John Ford, the great director, said he couldn't think of a more powerful image to begin a movie story than the image of a lone rider riding across the prairie or the desert, making his way toward camera, because in his estimation, it forced the audience to say, who is that? Why is he alone? Where did he come from? What does he want here? And they were already leaning into the story. In all the cases of all these opening images, opening clips, that's probably what you're feeling. You're leaning into the story. It'd be very hard to walk out of the theater after watching the opening of these films, and even sitting on your sofa with a remote control in your hand, it would be tough to change the channel. That's what you're trying to do. So you want to think very carefully about your opening image and your opening scene, because that's the first impression the audience gets of your movie, and you can't have a second first impression. The next thing, perhaps the second most important thing your opening needs to do, is to establish your protagonist. And the protagonist is the character with whom the audience places their empathy. The protagonist is the audience's guide through the story. You could almost think of it as like when you sit down to watch a movie and you're on your sofa or in the movie theater or wherever. It's as if you're waking up in a strange bedroom. And what do you ask? Where am I? Who am I with? And do I like them? That's kind of the dynamic that the audience is asking as they start a film. Another way of thinking of it, probably a better way to think of it, it's as if the audience all has little radar dishes on top of their heads, invisible radar dishes. And those radar dishes are searching for empathy. They're desperately looking for somebody with whom they can empathize. Who can I identify with? And it's not necessarily the first person they meet. For example, in Star Wars, we don't meet Luke Skywalker for quite some time, fairly deep into Act 1. Who do we meet first? We meet Princess Leia first, but she's not the protagonist of Star Wars. Why not? Because Lucas didn't give us any reason to empathize with her. She's a victim. She's getting attacked by Darth Vader. She's defiant. She's courageous, but we don't empathize with her yet. Maybe in later films we do, but not yet in this one. And then we spend quite a bit of time with C-3PO and R2-D2, and we don't empathize with them. Well, they're robots to begin with, and one of them doesn't even speak a human language. So we don't empathize with them, but then finally we meet Luke Skywalker, and we do empathize with him, and he becomes our protagonist. Why? Because how do we meet Luke? He's stuck on this rural planet, which is sort of the science fiction equivalent of Kansas. And he's stuck there, and his friends have all gone to the academy, whatever that means. But his friends have all gone away to college, and he's stuck here on this farm. And so, boom, just like that, Luke becomes our protagonist because we identify with him. We feel for him. He's going to be our boy. He's going to be our guide through this movie, and ultimately through 8 more, or no, not 8 more, but a lot more. When I saw 2001: A Space Odyssey when it first came out, I guess it was 1968, I was quite young. And I can remember to this day very vividly searching, just like I described, searching for empathy. I was trying to find a hero. Well, I knew the hero wasn't among the apes in the opening sequence. And then we do a sequence they go to the moon, and there was like a middle-aged guy, sort of a scientist, but I didn't really empathize with him. It's like, where's the hero? I couldn't remember. Where's the hero? Where's Buck Rogers? And then finally we go to the spaceship heading to Jupiter, and there's some younger male astronauts. And say, okay, these guys are going to be the hero. Great. But even then, they really weren't the heroes. I never could figure it out. Only later, many years later, as I grew up, and began to study film more seriously, did I realize that the protagonist of 2001 is humanity. It's all of us, from the apes to the astronauts, it's all of us. And the main character, the protagonist, has an arc, and the arc ends when humanity evolves into some new thing, which is the end of 2001. Yes, you can have more than one protagonist. Yes, you can have dual protagonists. Many love stories have dual protagonists, and you can have multiple protagonists. You can have quite a few. I did a TV movie years ago that had, I think, eight or 10 protagonists. It took place at a senior prom, and we were following different high school students as and their adventures on prom night, and some of their parents as well had multiple protagonists. The thing, though, is if you are going to have multiple protagonists, you have to do all the same things you would do if you're having a sole protagonist, and that is to say, the audience must empathize with all of those protagonists. You have to write that in. It's not just going to happen. You have to figure out how and why and when is the audience going to empathize with all of these characters. Remember, I'm saying empathy, not identify, or empathy or identify with, not like. They do not have to like the characters. If you're lucky enough to have your movie or pilot or your project get up to the level of getting notes from executives, you're going to receive a lot of stupid suit notes. But this one you hear more than any probably is your main character isn't likable. Well, they say likable, but they don't mean likable. What they really mean is identifiable. I don't feel for them. But they're going to tell you, can't you have the character? Why can't he pet a dog? Why can't he save a baby from a burning building? Those are the stupidest possible fixes. So you're going to nod, you're going to smile, and then you're going to not do what they tell you to, but rather fix the problem the proper way, which is to give the character more qualities with whom the audience can empathize. What you don't want to do is have the character save a cat. That is the worst thing you could possibly do. It's false, it's fake, it doesn't work. It bends the character and the story all out of shape when you do that. Again, identifiable, not likable. Many, if not most, of the protagonists of the great films ever made are unlikable if you actually break down their character, what they do. Yeah, that's not a very likable person, but they're identifiable. For example, how do we meet Michael Corleone at the beginning of The Godfather? We're at a wedding, we meet Marlon Brando, Don Corleone, and he's scary and intimidating and fascinating, but he's not empathetic. We meet Sonny, played by James Caan. He's good looking and kind of, a ladies' man, but he's not likable. He's not identifiable, rather. But how do we meet Michael? Here's how.
Please, Michael, tell me.
My darling, until I saw you.
Well, when Johnny was first starting out, he was signed to this personal service contract with a big band leader.
Nobody else.
And as his career got better and better, he wanted to get out of it. Now, Johnny is my father's godson. And my father went to see this band leader. And he offered him $10,000 to let Johnny go. But the band leader said no. So the next day, my father went to see him, only this time with Luca Brasi. Within an hour, he signed a release for a certified check of $1,000.
How'd he do that?
My father made him an offer he couldn't refuse.
What was that?
Luca Brasi held a gun to his head, and my father assured him that either his brains or his signature would be on a contract. That's a true story.
Ma parlarezza stunga morì.
That's my family, Kate. It's not me.
Okay, why is he the protagonist? Because he's embarrassed by his family. That's my family, Kay. It's not me, he says. He's embarrassed by them. How many of us have brought home a significant other, and just before we take them to meet our parents, what do we say? God, I know my father's going to say some crazy stuff. Just remember, that's not me. I know my mother's so overbearing. Just remember, I don't believe any of that stuff she says. We're embarrassed. We've all been there. And therefore, we empathize with Michael. Michael is going to go on to do horrible things. He's going to kill people. He's going to lie about it. But we're still, because we identify with him, because we're with him on this journey, the film works, and the tragedy of the ending works. The entire arc of his character works because of that. The single most important line in the film is, "That's my family, Kate. That's not K. That's not me. I would say the protagonists of most of the film's clips I'm showing you, the protagonists are mostly unlikable people. Shakespeare settled this question 480 years ago with Richard III, the ultimate unlikable protagonist. He's a horrible, horrible person. He does terrible things. He's a mass murderer. He's a child murderer. He murders a guy and seduces the widow at the guy's funeral. He's horrible. How in the world did Shakespeare pull that off? Why? How did he do it? He had Richard III talk directly to the audience and explain that he's bitter and resentful and why he's bitter and resentful. And this is how I'm going to go about screwing over all those other people who have stuff that I don't have. Come on with me. I'll show you how I do it. And we went with him. We were with him on the journey. Who could possibly be more unlikable than a stuffy, rich, pompous, short-tempered, entitled British royal? But when David Seidler wrote the King's Speech, here's how he introduced the protagonist.
Remember, sir, 3 flashes, then steady red means you're live.
Using the new invention of radio, the opening ceremony was the first time His Majesty the King
addressed his subjects on the wireless.
At the close of the first season, the heir to the throne, His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales, made his first broadcast. And today, his younger brother,
His Royal Highness the Duke of York, will give his inaugural broadcast to the nation and the world.
I have received from His Majesty the King
He's terrified of speaking in public, like everybody. And worse still, he stammers and he's humiliated, and we are with him for the rest of the journey, no matter how rotten he is. And he's a pretty rotten person by and large. Now, let's talk about endings. You end your story when the central conflict, that is to say the spine, is resolved. The central conflict must be resolved before the story can end. But, this is the good news, you only have to resolve the central conflict, which is why it's so terribly important, one of the reasons why it's so terribly important to identify your spine. Know what your central conflict is, because then you know when your story's over. The central conflict has been resolved. For example, in the movie Michael Clayton, I would say the spine is something like this. A sleazy attorney must decide how immoral he's willing to be when a corporate client commits murder. And here's the end of Michael Clayton.
Is there a problem?
I don't understand.
Here, let me get a picture while I'm at it.
You don't want the money?
No, you keep the money. You're gonna need it.
Is this fellow bothering you?
I don't know. Am I bothering you?
Now, Michael Clayton is still in debt to mobsters. His marriage is broken up. He hates his job. His brother hates him. He's a compulsive gambler. But the only thing that needs to be resolved for that ending to be satisfying is the central conflict. And it has been when he says, who are you? I'm Shiva, the god of death. It's a callback to an earlier line, but it basically means I'm going to take you down no matter what it does to me. That's where I draw the line. Here's the ending of Whiplash. Now that only resolves the spine of the story. That character is probably going to go on to become an obsessive, obnoxious perfectionist, just like his instructor. But the story, the central conflict, has been resolved, therefore the story's over. And it's a semi-tragic ending. Yes, he's succeeded, but he's given up part of his soul to get there. Which reminds me of another thing that we have to keep in mind, and that is resolution does not mean happy ending. You're going to get a lot of notes about that too. Gee, can't you make the ending happy? It needs to be, it can be tragic, it can be happy, but the main thing is it needs to be truthful to the story you've set up. In the movie Sideways, it's a story about a failed writer who must confront his life of lies and deceit and self-delusion when he takes his buddy on a week-long bachelor party road trip. And our protagonist is going to meet a woman, he's going to fall in love with her, but then she's going to discover all these lies he's been telling, and she's got nothing to do with him. His life is collapsed around him. And then this happens at the end.
One new message.
Hello, Miles. It's Maya. Thanks for your letter. I would have called sooner, but I think I needed some time to think about everything that happened and what you wrote to me. Another reason I didn't call you sooner is because I wanted to finish your book, which I finally did last night. And I think it's really lovely, Miles. You're so good with words. And who cares if it's not getting published? There's so many beautiful and painful things about it. Did you really go through all that? It must have been awful. And the sister character, jeez, what a wreck. But I have to say that, well, I was really confused by the ending. I mean, did the father finally commit suicide or what? It's driving me crazy. Anyway, it's turned cold and rainy here lately, but I like winter. So, listen, if you ever do decide to come up here again, you should let me know. I would say stop by the restaurant, but to tell you the truth, I'm not sure how much longer I'm going to be working there. Because I'm going to graduate soon. So I'll probably want to relocate. I mean, we'll see. Anyway, like I said, I really loved your novel. Don't give up, Miles. Keep writing. I hope you're well. Bye.
The story is resolved, the central conflict is resolved when he knocks on the door. Because what's going to happen, he's going to say, I love you, and he's going to take whatever the consequences are. Whatever she says back to him, he's going to have to take the hit of the truth, whatever that is. Maybe she'll say, I love you too. Maybe, more likely, she's going to say, oh gosh, that's really sweet, but I just want to be friends. But he's going to take it, whatever that is. He's going to finally confront the truth as it happens to him. What if the ending were the door opening and the woman's on the other side and he says, I love you, and she says, I love you too, and they hug and kiss and they go skipping off happily down the beach. Now, I'm sure Alexander Payne and Jim Taylor, who wrote that script, had that pitched to them by an agent or a manager or studio executives or somebody along the line, probably lots of people along the line. If they had done it, it would have felt false, it would have been pandering, and it basically just would have sucked. Remember how The Searchers opened? Okay, here's the ending of The Searchers.
Search his heart and soul. Go searching way out there. His peace of mind he knows he'll find. But where, oh Lord, Lord, where? Right away, right
The protagonist has brought back the kidnapped girl, but he doesn't belong inside. He doesn't belong with civilized people. And he watches them go inside, and he turns away and goes back out into the wilderness, and the door closes behind him on happiness and fulfillment. It's a very powerful ending. It's also set up, as you may have noticed, by the beginning when the door opens and the camera goes out with the woman in the farmhouse and sees the character played by John Wayne riding toward them at the beginning of the story, which tells you that the screenwriter Frank Nugent and the director John Ford were thinking about the ending at the beginning and were thinking about the beginning at the ending. It was not just something that came about. They planned it that way. Here's the ending of The Godfather.
Michael, is it true?
Don't ask me about my business, Kate.
Is it true?
Don't ask me about my business.
No.
All right. This one time. This one time I'll let you ask me about my affairs.
Is it true?
No.
I guess we both need a drink, huh? Come on.
That Corleone.
So Michael has just completed his arc. The protagonist has completed his arc, and he has become a monster. That's my family, Kay. That's not me. Oh, yes, it is you, Michael. So he's succeeded at becoming a Don, and he's failed at being a decent human being. And he's closed out, literally, visually, on decency at that point. His wife is the only thing left in his life that is decent, and he closes the door on her. And yes, Francis Ford Coppola stole that shot from The Searchers. I'm sure he would admit it. I recently, just 2 days ago, my wife and I watched a movie on Netflix called Leave the World Behind. It's a big movie, equivalent of a big studio movie, even though it was on Netflix. Julia Roberts, Ethan Hawke, Kevin Bacon, Mahershala Ali. Big cast, talented cast, lots of money, great special effects, very well directed, very engaging, very intriguing. I'm with the movie until the end. And it just sort of ended. It was unsatisfying, to say the least. The reason why they had no ending, in my opinion, is because they had no protagonist with a central conflict. There was a plot. There was a big, dystopian, apocalyptic plot going on, but the characters didn't have a central conflict. No one character had a central conflict with whom we engaged, and therefore they had nothing to end. They had no way to resolve a central conflict that didn't exist, so they just tried to resolve the story by tying up the plot, by having a character just explain the reasons behind all this stuff, this weird, strange stuff that had been happening for 2 hours. And it didn't work at all, because first of all, it didn't even begin to explain everything that had happened. Secondly, it was done verbally, which is about the least exciting way to deliver a climactic scene most of the time. It just didn't work. And the movie was, in my opinion, a failure. Because it's on Netflix, there is no box office, and because it's on Netflix, the ratings are hard to believe, or often not shared at all. And even when they are, it's hard to tell what they really mean. Netflix will tell us it's a success, but Netflix is only concerned with keeping subscribers. They don't really care whether their movies are any good or not. And this was a classic example of something we talked about earlier. The problems are all in the script. There is nothing wrong with the performances. There's nothing wrong with the direction. There's nothing wrong with the production design. There's nothing wrong with anything except they didn't have an ending because the story wasn't properly structured. Okay, next up, we're going to start talking about the fun stuff, writing scenes.